We're here. All right. Hello and welcome to Cheyenne's Forum. Hello, Tom. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming to our program. And last time we have lots of feedback on our interview, and people just really appreciate your contribution. Your sorry, what you have done for this country. So really appreciate it. And then
Thank you.
we have lots of questions. And also they give me a suggestion is let's just do the English part. And then I will do another program separately, just to introduce what we are talking in this interview. So we're going to do the separate interview, separate program. One is with you. One is just me to introduce that into Chinese.
Okay.
That sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, 所以各位观众朋友，我们现在跟这个Tom 再谈一次这个 interview。那这个 interview 全是英文的。那下一个呢，我会立刻再做一个节目，就是用中文介绍这一次的 interview。所以你可以继续收看我们这个节目，提问题也可以等一会儿我那个 program 出来，那是中文的。Oh, thank you so much. I just translate and then explain to my audience. So last time, you give me a very important information. It's about FBI. Actually, you have a good part and some not good part. The good part is most of the agents, they're good. They have no problem. But the upper management team, they've got problem. So this is such an important message that let people know that not every FBI agent is bad, because right now the image of FBI and also CIA is not good. So thank you so much for just clear that in the FBI, within the FBI. Now I have some question regarding three critical time and what happened at the three time in FBI. I mean, within the FBI. The first period of time is after 9/11. And the second period of time is after 2008 when Obama got into White House. Is that change anything in FBI? That's
Well,
the second period of time. And the third period of time is after Biden get into the White House. So three critical time is after 9/11, after Obama got into White House, after Biden get into the White House. How FBI changed, and also how this change affect the American people. That's the question.
well, after 9/11, the biggest concern was to prevent the next terrorist attack.
Sure.
Was bin Laden and Al Qaeda going to launch another attack like 9/11? Did they have more than one plan in progress to commit an attack like that? Mm-hmm. And so much of the many resources of the FBI were diverted to add to the counterterrorism program. Mm-hmm. So, for example, our biggest office at that time, I was in charge of the FBI's International Organized Crime Program. Mm-hmm. And offices like our New York office, the number one priority of the New York office of the FBI was organized crime because it was so huge. And we were dedicated nationwide to reducing the influence of La Cosa Nostra, which was the mafia in America, cousins of the Italian mafia. And while reducing La Cosa Nostra from 26 families down to 5 or 6, at the same time, preventing Chinese groups, Japanese groups, other groups, Russian groups, South American groups, Jamaican, all those other organized crime groups from becoming powerful like La Cosa Nostra. So, for instance, Chinese groups like the Triads, many were based in Hong Kong, some were based in mainland China. Then we had Japanese groups nicknamed Yakuza, but commonly referred to as Yakuza, but the actual technical name was Boryokudan. And they were very, very involved in activities in Japan in areas where there were large Japanese populations like the West Coast of the United States or Hawaii, for example. Then we had Russian organized crime groups that were growing rapidly, particularly after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union fell in 1991. The organized crime groups during that time, especially in Europe and in Russia, were fighting each other for dominance. And so there was a tremendous amount of violence directed at each other while they were trying to kill each other, competition, and gain prominence. So several groups rose very high during that period of time, and we were addressing them very strongly, working very well with our Russian counterparts, working with our Chinese counterparts, our Japanese. We had working groups in all of these countries to try to prevent those organized crime groups from destroying the countries that they were in and gaining a foothold in the United States and getting political and economic power here like the La Cosa Nostra obtained. So we were very proud of the fact that we reduced La Cosa Nostra significantly and then prevented any of the other groups from becoming dominant. And when I say dominant, I mean able to bribe high public officials, congressmen, senators, governors, police chiefs, all of that type of thing. Business companies take over these large corporations, trucking industry in New York, garment industry, a number of key industries in the United States that became dominated by La Cosa Nostra. And so during that time, particularly in the 90s and then in the early 2000s, before, even with 9/11, we were able to reduce them. Now, one of the fortunate, I guess, things for my program, the organized crime, was on 9/11, we had wiretaps on various La Cosa Nostra mafia bosses, particularly in New York. Okay. And the New York bosses were calling each other, and we were intercepting these calls, congratulating each other because the FBI had removed them from the waste hauling industry, had dramatically removed them from large construction, high-rise construction in New York, the price of concrete, control of the laborers union and other high-tech unions. And they looked at 9/11. Now, these are mafia bosses who are Americans. We're looking at this like, we're back in business. There's going to be huge construction projects to rebuild the city, the part of New York that was destroyed and other places. We're going to be able to do a number of things. And, you know, being cynical FBI agents, we were crudely joking with each other. And I don't know how well this will translate, but we were joking with each other that the mafia bosses were saying, because they were predominantly pretended to be Catholic. So if you saw the movie Godfather, you saw the baptism ceremonies in a Catholic church. You saw the parades in New York City, the Feast of San Gennaro, where they were pretending to be really strong Catholics.
Right.
They weren't, but they pretended for their image. But we were saying to each other, when 9/11 happened, these guys were calling each other going, you know, that Jesus never did anything for us, but Allah, he's putting us back in business. So, praising the Islamic terrorists that committed 9/11. Now they were doing that, actually. They were, you know, making jokes with each other that all the efforts of the FBI and the Department of Justice to reduce their power, that with 9/11, they were going to be able to get contracts with no bids and various, you know, illegal activity. They'd be able to do that. And of course, one of the big industries was waste hauling, garbage pickup, let's say, because they knew that in New York, tremendous project of getting the debris removed from ground zero at the World Trade Center. So one of the aspects of that, we hear them already talking that they're going to take that debris. It'll go on large trucks, be driven across the river to New Jersey. And then the government plan was that the trucks would make several stops. So they would go to the first landfill stop and do just a big sorting of the debris, take out large pieces of it. And then it would go from there to the next lot and it would be they would have finer equipment to make it down to smaller pieces, and then go to the third lot where they would be taking jewelry and things like that, small items. And so what we did was we had designated government sites where that debris would be taken to for evidence examination, forensic examination. And so what we did is we had sensitive GPS devices installed on every truck that was hauling debris out of ground zero. So we could track that truck going across the bridges, going on the interstates to within about 10 feet. So if they deviated off the highway to one of the organized crime landfills, we would know it, and we could immediately go there and stop them. And so that prevented them from being involved in the waste. But waste hauling had been something very strong in New York. So if you're operating any of the businesses, especially in the high rises, they were charging exorbitant fees for waste pickup. All the office buildings, the paper, the trash, all of that. And the FBI had removed them from those contracts so that they were actually being honestly bid for by these companies. Now they looked at it like, now we're back in business. The FBI is not going to be able to stop us. We're going to be able to do that. So we had a number of resources devoted to making sure that the debris from ground zero actually ended up where it was supposed to, at government-controlled, FBI-controlled sites where the debris could be closely examined.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, so those are the type of activities that were going on after 9/11, and then scrutinizing contracts and other efforts that they were doing. Now, later you mentioned Obama comes to office.
No, not yet. So after 9/11, we have a Patriot Act. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So is that something happened that unexpected, or it's have a very huge effect to how FBI works?
It had a pretty huge effect. At the time, the issue was how easily the FBI could conduct surveillance on various people or groups. Electronic surveillance, commonly called wiretapping, was one of these things. So it was designed to make it much easier under the Patriot Act. Now, normally under national security investigations, you have to cite, if a group of people are committing activities and it's not organized crime, it's not criminal, but it's national security, in that situation, you have to identify as the investigative agency, okay, what group do they belong to? Are they part of a foreign power? Are they KGB, or are they another agent? Are they FSB?
Identify first.
So you have to identify a group that they belong to. Then you have to identify, if they're terrorists, what terrorist group.
Right.
So like right now, Hamas, Hezbollah, at that time, Al-Qaeda, other terrorist groups. So what the Patriot Act did was expand the ability to get wiretaps against groups that you didn't know for sure who the terrorist group was.
So basically, anybody can, it's to anybody, right?
Well, it was kind of the, the old slogan, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it might be a duck. So you can't say what kind of duck, but you know what they're doing looks like a duck.
Okay.
And so we had that with some of the wiretaps that were being done, where individuals were communicating, and this would be an example of the 9/11 hijackers that were taking lessons to learn how to fly.
Right.
But they weren't learning how to land the plane.
Right.
And so we had, flight schools where some of them were reporting that later on, this is what happened. Now, most of them didn't tell us in advance, but after the hijackers hit the attack, then we had flight schools saying, well, we were suspicious. We didn't report it. But so at that point now, if someone else went to one of these schools and said they want to learn how to fly a plane in flight, but we don't care about how to take off, and we don't care about how to land. Right. So basically, the plane is going to be in flight. They're going to take over in the cockpit, take over the plane, and now they can guide it into a building or a monument or some other facility. And then they're not worried about landing, because they're not going to land. They're going to crash. So So those kind of things under the Patriot Act, the ability of the government to conduct this kind of surveillance was expanded or made more easy to accomplish. Now, you've had a number of people since then saying it's gone too far. Over the years now, 22 years later, do we need this kind of extensive coverage or expanded easy coverage? And then, of course, in the interim, you had people like Snowden and others, like whistleblowers, saying it's gone too far. Mm-hmm. And the government can wiretap practically anybody they want, or the FBI can do various things. But at the time I was still in the FBI, it was still very closely guarded to get mm-hmm. wiretaps, even in a national security case or in a criminal. There are two separate sets of procedures mm-hmm. To do it. Mm-hmm. So that's Patriot Act.
Maybe it's a good intention. Of course, at that time, it's good intention. And maybe some people abuse it, which happens everywhere.
Right. Well, at the time, the FBI, from the history of the FBI and all police agencies, the task was, especially in a free society mm-hmm. like the United States, the task was, if somebody does a bad thing, they commit a murder or they commit an arson or they commit a serious crime, then you investigate to find out who did that. Right. You investigate after the crime was committed.
Always behind.
Always behind. But with 9/11, then the orders going to agencies like the FBI was prevent the next attack. Right. And the only way to prevent it is to gather intelligence. What are people thinking? What are their intentions? You don't wait till they do it. You do, what were they thinking? Go after them at the time they're thinking it. Mm-hmm. I'll divert for a few minutes. When I was a little kid, my brothers and friends and I used to love to watch The Three Stooges. And uh-huh. I don't know if you've ever seen The Three Stooges little movies like they made in the 30s. Uh-huh. And in The Three Stooges, the leader would slap the other two and they'd say, "I didn't do nothing. What was that for?" And he'd say, "That's for what you were thinking." And that's kind of what the philosophy was. Figure out what people are thinking, right. because then maybe they're going to do something bad based on what they're thinking. And that's a huge issue, to get into somebody's intentions if they right. haven't done it yet. Right. So now, under the theory of looks like a duck and walks like a duck, mm-hmm. if they're trying to obtain weapons, if they're trying to obtain blueprints of government buildings, if they're trying to, do those kind of support activities, learn how to make explosives, or mm-hmm. they go on, they start messaging each other. Mm-hmm. And I think in those days, they didn't suspect emails were being as closely scrutinized. So they would send a message, does anybody know how to make a bomb? Does anybody know how to shoot a gun? Or where can I get a machine gun? Where can I get hand grenades? Where can I get various things? And then if that ended up going to the FBI or other agencies that contacted the FBI, then it would be follow up. Who is that person? Why do they want this? What's their background? Mm-hmm. What are they American? Are they citizens from another? What is the story with their intention to learn how to use that kind of weaponry, weapons of terrorism? Mm-hmm. And so that became kind of an offshoot after 9/11 to mm-hmm. find out who intends to do us harm and then stop it, prevent them from doing it.
So do you think that works? It really prevents something bad happening?
Yeah, it worked in many cases. Good. But mm-hmm. it's an infringement on many of our freedoms to do it. Right, so in many cases, it worked successfully. Right. But some Americans are saying, wait a minute, it's still, you have too much power to look at what we're doing, to look at our emails and our letters and our, the meetings that we have with other people. So in some cases it worked, but people at that time were exchanging freedom for security. Mm-hmm. And that's still the age-old debate, especially with many countries. So if you have, the CCP, they're not too worried about your freedom in China. Yeah, they just want their security. Here in the United States,
it's easier.
Right. So here, freedom is a cornerstone of the U.S. going back 250 years. Right. So to suddenly say, we're going to take away some of your freedoms to make it safer for everybody else, that's still a hard philosophy to sell American people on, especially when they look at cases and wonder, did it go too far? Did they entrap the person? So in other words, you might have some person that's basically, an idiot say, anybody out there can help me make a nuclear bomb.
Right.
And then the FBI would, send an informant or something, would meet that person and, yeah, I want to make a nuclear bomb. Can you help me? Sure. Sure, I can.
Just like what you said. Yeah.
So the idea was they were not going to be able to do it on their own.
Right.
And the only way they're going to do it is with extensive help from somebody.
Right.
And if that somebody happens to be the FBI, now people are saying in American law, that's called entrapment. In other words, somebody cannot commit the crime on their own, and then you help them. You help them to commit it so that you can then charge them with doing the crime. And so that's a fine line. It's heavily watched by our executives in operating these cases to make sure that the investigators don't go too far and enable somebody to do something that they would have never been able to do. They would have never been able to, make those kind of explosives or get those kind of weapons or any of that. We had many cases like that.
Like the philosophy, you look like a dog, walk like a dog, and maybe a dog. Look like an idiot, act like an idiot, and maybe it's an idiot. So
that's true. Except think about this: we've had mass murders in this country committed by idiots. Now we just had this one in New England, where the individual having mental problems, and he was a military instructor, having mental problems, and they couldn't take his weapons away. But in his case, he killed 18 people. So if he was contacting a group, he did this by himself, but if he was contacting a group, I'm going to, do such and such, they might have just said, oh, forget about it. He's an idiot. He won't be able to do that. We don't, so you have to watch that many of the people that have committed horrible things in world history were also deranged or had some other mental difficulty going on that caused them to be like that.
It's just like a student. No matter where you prepared for an exam, you still can fail. So that's the thing. That's the complicated. We just try to do our best, and it's a pro and cons, and then we're talking about abuse. So this is very interesting but complicated.
It's complicated. We had, I was on an executive committee to review applications for sensitive operations. So a field office would send in a request to FBI headquarters. We want to have this undercover operation or that. And they would have to explain, how is this being brought up? Who learned about it? Is that an informant or an agent? And what do you want to do? And we would closely supervise, make sure that the investigators didn't cross the line.
Right. It all depends on how you operate this whole thing. Right. So this is after 9/11. So then let's go to the time just moved, and let's go to 2008 after Obama got into White House. Any change from that?
Well, Obama, later in his administration started to show that he's not a big supporter of law enforcement, not on the side of trying to do some of that. But there were other issues that came up, and especially toward the end of the Obama administration, when you had the political campaign leading to the election of 2016. And during that time, you have in 2015, Donald Trump announces that he's going to be a candidate. You have Hillary Clinton, of course, just thinking she's going to be automatically, elected.
Overconfident, huh?
Yeah, very much. And Hillary, the Obama administration, it later comes up that they were having meetings to try to improperly or wrongly accuse Trump. He's colluding with Russia. He's colluding with Putin, and they're going to sabotage the election. Turns out later it was actually Hillary that was supplying. She had her people supplying that dossier to the FBI. Right. And the FBI starts an investigation during the campaign, and then after Trump is elected, where they're basically trying to sabotage Trump and say that the Russians helped. It was Russia.
Right.
And Trump finds out through somebody in the administration, goes to Trump during the campaign and says, the Obama administration is spying on you. Mm-hmm. So at that time, he had the Trump campaign headquarters in the Trump Tower building in Manhattan, in New York. Mm-hmm. And he finds out from a member of the National Defense, mm-hmm. who tells him that he had learned that Hillary Clinton, with Obama's knowledge and approval, Biden was in the meetings, other people were in the meetings. James Comey, FBI director. They were in these meetings where they were going to actually go after Trump and claim that Trump was colluding with Russia to improperly affect the election. It was a complete lie. Complete lie. Right. So Trump finds out about it and he says, that they're spying on me, mm-hmm. which was true. And everybody in the country says, what a liar. That's right. False. Right. So turns out it was true, and they find out later. But at the time, this investigation starts. All the major networks, MSNBC and CNN and the other ones, are saying Trump is saying he's being spied on. That's not true. Everybody knows that the election is being interfered with by Russia.
When does that happen? It's
2015, the end of 2015, 2016 presidential campaign, and then it continues after Trump is elected. They're trying to sabotage him.
Mm-hmm. So you talk about that Obama is not a huge supporter to law enforcement. Do you know why, or any guess why he's not a good?
I think he's just much more liberal and progressive and borderline, if not all the way, Marxist, to basically be against law enforcement efforts, unless it's being used unless they use it for an enemy, which Trump they considered an enemy. So now let's mobilize the FBI. Let's move all of our resources to go after that. One of the individuals in those meetings was Michael Flynn. And Flynn is a patriot. He was a patriot. He was part of the security in the Pentagon, mm-hmm. and ran the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is a kind of a cousin to the CIA. So sure. CIA is a separate independent agency. DIA is part of the Pentagon. And mm-hmm. so Flynn basically is not letting them use DIA mm-hmm. as part of this mechanism. And so now when Trump gets elected, Trump ends up selecting Flynn to be head of his national security apparatus. And so that's when the Obama administration sabotages Flynn and frames him, said that he had done all these bad things, get him arrested, get him neutralized so that he no longer can work for Trump. He's out of the administration. Right. And we find out Flynn later learns that what they were accusing him of was not true. But they wanted to get Flynn out of the picture because he knew all of the illegal things that Obama, Hillary, Biden, Comey, John Brennan from the CIA, he knew all the plots that they were doing against Trump that were illegal. Mm-hmm. And so later, that gets proven. So here they turn over all this phony information to the FBI. They open the case, which Trump nicknames and the country nicknames Russiagate, like Watergate, Russiagate. And again, not true. And so anyway, Trump later, you have the FBI, being accused of this. They have an investigation. Special attorney is put in there, Durham. And the Durham investigates for a couple of years. He finds out that Trump absolutely did not collude with Russia. All of the accusations were false. Then you have Robert Mueller, the former head of the FBI, replaced by Comey. Mueller gets put in charge of special prosecutor investigation of Trump. He finds no evidence that Trump or anybody in the campaign colluded with Russia. So he did
not lie. He tell the truth, right?
Well, he had a number of investigators who were Democratic attorneys from the Department of Justice. So his people were trying to find evidence. They worked very hard to find something that they could get Trump on, and they couldn't. So the Mueller investigation, which took about 2 years, cost about $40 or $50 million of taxpayer money, comes up negative. And then Trump testifies before Congress that they could find no evidence that Trump had ever colluded with Russia or Putin or any of that. So that's what Trump was faced with all during the campaign. And then in the beginning of his presidency, for a couple of years, this went on.
So if Americans still consider a country with law and order, so what they do, like Obama, like Hillary, etc., it's illegal. It's unlawful. So do you think they're going to have some punishment will happen?
No.
Eventually? No?
No. And the reason is that right now, all of the individuals that were doing this were part of the Democratic Party apparatus. So you had Hillary Clinton, Obama himself, Joe Biden, the vice president at the time, the head of the CIA, John Brennan, who had personally worked for Obama earlier before being appointed head of CIA. And everybody in that group, except for Michael Flynn, were loyal to Obama and wanted to take Trump out. Flynn was the only truly honest person, so they had to frame him. And bring charges against him. Trump later pardons Flynn, and he gets out. But by that time, 2 years, 3 years of damage had already been done to Flynn. They bankrupted Flynn in the process. All of that effort that they did was really improper. Now, the problem is that by time all of the evidence of this comes to light is during the Biden administration. And now you've got Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, the current FBI Director, Christopher Wray. All of these individuals are directing the apparatus of the federal judicial system and investigative system against Trump and in favor of the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, and then going back to Obama himself. So that's why, as long as you have the current administration, you will not have justice against those, that you will not have accountability against those people.
So if 2024 Trump get back to White House, things will change, right?
Maybe. Well, we'll see. We'll see what, if that happens, and then who he appoints into the key positions, a new attorney general, hopefully a new director of the FBI. We'll see. We'll see, what they do. Will the advice Trump gets is, forget about those. Let's just move forward. Let's forget about those bad things they did for 8 years against you. Let's just move on. So that's a question of whether that would be in the best interest for the sake of the country or not. We don't know.
So
we don't know yet that Trump, they're throwing everything they can to try to prevent Trump from being elected again. And they may succeed. It's only in the earliest stages of these prosecutions, which are just completely unprecedented in our country.
So they are, seems to everybody, they're against the Trump, just like what you said, do everything to against the Trump and prevent Trump from getting elected to the president. But indeed, I think they're against people, American people. So
it's basically, to me, it's a Marxist philosophy.
Right.
And so, yes, they hate America. They're trying to bring the U.S. down. Now, one of the issues with Marxist philosophy, let's say, is that you had the World Economic Forum for 20 years, from Davos, Switzerland meetings, for 20 years or more. They've been trying to bring down so you have the United States up here, the rest of the world down here economically, and they were trying to bring the U.S. down to the level of everybody else. And so, or raise the other countries. So they've not been unable to create that equality. So now their newest philosophy is they can't bring these other countries up, just bring the U.S. down, make the economy of the country crash, make law and order in this country gone, weaponize the Department of Justice, weaponize do all these bad things to hurt the United States system and the government of the United States. And that's where they're at right now. Now, Joe Biden I have gotten in trouble for saying, listen closely. Joe Biden is the strongest leader the United States has ever had.
Right.
Strongest leader. Mm-hmm. No one else has been able to move the U.S. down so fast in 3 years as he has.
Right.
How much of a strong leader is that?
Right.
To the detriment of the United States. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at right now. Now, the controversy, is Biden going to be the candidate? The Democrats are already trying to undermine him. Biden, I think, is trying to get a war going somewhere. The Ukraine war is failing, and they won't tell the truth. Ukraine is lost. Mm-hmm. They're trying to, expand the war with Israel into every Islamic country that surrounds Israel. Mm-hmm. And that way, Biden can be a wartime president, thinking that the country will patriotically rally around Joe Biden because he's leading this war effort. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't believe that. I don't think that's going to work for Biden. And I think that Biden is in such bad shape mentally.
Right.
And his government philosophy is so bad that he's pretty much brought the economy down. Everything that was in place 3 years ago, strongest economy in history, lowest inflation, greatest unemployment numbers, energy independent, if not dominant, all of these things, inflation at 2%. Mm-hmm. That's all been wiped out by Biden. So Biden's been able to do a lot in 3 short years, all to the negative of the U.S.
So what is change after Biden administration on FBI? Worse than the previous, the Obama period of time?
Yeah, the problem with the FBI is that starting with Comey as director, continuing with Christopher Wray, those two directors have taken the FBI in the wrong direction also. They've weaponized the FBI to go after conservatives, pro-lifers, churches, religious people. All of these they've created as kind of enemies of the state. And even in the last couple of months, you had Christopher Wray saying that the biggest domestic terrorism threat in the United States is MAGA, is Trump supporters. And now the question is, how many hundred or how many thousand members of Hamas and Hezbollah came across the open border under Biden into the United States? Now, we already know that Mexico has 2 large cells of Hezbollah and Hamas in Mexico. So they're a short distance from coming into the U.S. How many have come in already? And what are their attack plans and what might be going on? So right now, behind the scenes, national security people are saying that there's a current major threat in the United States by these groups. And they have a lot of support. And most Americans would never, ever have believed that Hamas and Hezbollah would have support in the United States until now, when you've seen the demonstrations in Washington, New York, and other large cities in the past couple of weeks supporting Hezbollah and Hamas. And these are terrorist organizations. So I think that the idea that they would get support if they want to do a terrorist act, whether it's a physical attack with explosives or weapons or a cyber attack, they have many educated members of that perfectly capable of trying to shut down our water supply, our electric grid, aviation, the computers that control our aviation system. They could attack the U.S. by cyber attack just as much as a physical attack where they kill people. So I think that right now, the Biden administration, and you still don't hear a word out of the Democrats condemning the open border, saying, shut it down now. It's too late. You've let so many people in, but don't let it anymore.
Right.
In one ear and out the other, and they stick together. So that's a continuing problem, which I think will exist as long as Biden is president.
So if you are the director of FBI right now, what can you do to?
I think immediately the short term is clean house at the executive level of the FBI, the so-called 7th floor, which I spent the last 5 years of my career on the 7th. I was one of those guys before the FBI went went negative during the Trump 2015, 2016 till now time frame. But I would get rid of all those people and bring in new executives. Now, what's interesting about the FBI right now is that they're hiring very good people almost accidentally. And the reason is that as these various police departments in the country started defunding and letting go of good officers, many of those, and I had been a police officer for 6 years before joining, many of these really good officers that originally might not have joined the FBI because they might not have wanted to move or get transferred, move their family. But now, seeing the decline of good police departments, many of them have joined the FBI in the last 2 years. So friends of mine that run the hiring program of the FBI are saying we have some outstanding police officers that have now joined the FBI because of what's gone on with defunding the police. Secondly, we have a tremendous number of good military officers, 5-10 years in the military, and that would put them still in their maybe late 20s age-wise, that because the military has gone so woke, is so terrible under the current administration, when Milley was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, now they have a new one, that because the military has been in such decline, they can't meet their hiring quotas. A recent study determined that 70% of our current military is overweight. A percentage of them is obese. This would never have been allowed. 5-10 years ago, if you didn't maintain your weight, you're out.
Yeah.
But so you have good officers, and now they're talking, the philosophy, the Marxist philosophy of the Biden administration, of the government, is we don't want competence. We don't want meritocracy. We don't want to hire people because they're the best. We don't want them to have to take tests to show that they're the best. Let's just hire based on what color is your skin? What sex are you? What gender? Are you transgender? All of these various categories has now governed the recent hiring and promotion within the military. And good officers that are dedicated to protecting the United States are saying, you know what? I'm going to join the FBI because they also protect the United States. And so as of right now, that's a very good trend. So you have young officers hired as agents, young police officers hired as agents, working their way up, and the biased and I think illegal executives at the top, they're kind of too far down the ladder for them to pay attention to. So the decisions at the top, of course, on the most sensitive cases, what the operations that they're conducting, not necessarily going down to the level at the street of the first line supervisor. So my hope is that in a year, and then after a couple months for the swearing in, so in January 2025, we have a new president, and the very first thing he does is get rid of Merrick Garland and the director of the FBI immediately, and then bring people in that are going to be dedicated to professionalizing the FBI to where it was. Now, I have said on other podcasts, during my career rising up the ladder, for 1 year, I was on the inspection staff. And as an inspector, you would go around to each of the field offices divisions, headquarters divisions, and legal attaché offices around the world every 3 years and inspect them for were they efficient, effective, following the rules, being successful. And if a boss wasn't, it was career threatening to the head of that division. If they weren't doing the job, they were removed and either fired or put in some other position. So we need to restore that in that process. Now, an example, Christopher Wray, when it came out publicly this past January, 11 months ago, it came out that a memo was issued in the Richmond FBI office, which said that one of the Catholic churches in their division was conducting a mass in Latin. And the FBI decided that if they're doing a Catholic mass in Latin, they must be domestic terrorists. We need to investigate. We need to put undercover agents in that church. We need to go after them. We need to put a stop to that. Mm-hmm. Christopher Wray, when that comes out publicly, the memo was issued January 23rd. When Wray finds out about it, he's testifying before Congress about a month or two later. His comment is, when I heard about that, I was aghast. I ordered that memo deleted out of our system, and I ordered an immediate inquiry into who issued that order and how did it get published. Well, that's what inspectors do. So at the time I was an inspector, they would say, okay, Tom, put together a team, 4 or 5 assistant inspectors, and go to Richmond and investigate. Mm-hmm. That investigation, who did this, who issued the memo, who's operating, what orders have they issued based on that would have been accomplished in about a week or 2 weeks, let's say. Mm-hmm. Now, the director testifies in the summer, in July, and he testifies in the House to Jim Jordan's committee, Jim Jordan questioning him. Then in the Senate, Josh Hawley on the Senate committee interrogating him. And he says the same thing. Oh, that memo, I was aghast. And we pulled it out of all of our systems. And it was a one-off situation. That was the only field office affected. Nobody else was involved in this. And both members of Congress asked him, when are you going to have the results from your inquiry? Mm-hmm. We'll have that by the end of summer. When I heard that, I knew he was completely lying, because that inquiry was initiated the end of January. It should have been finished within a week or 2. Right. Now in the middle of summer, he's saying, well, maybe by the end of summer. So in other words, it's going to be 9-10 months or more to announce who's in trouble, who's going to get fired. How did that happen? We've heard nothing. No further inquiry about it. It's just gone like, oh, let's just forget about that. And he insisted it was only one field office. And then it comes out later that other field offices also circulated. Portland FBI and Los Angeles circulated the same memo and were doing the same thing, trying to investigate Catholic churches doing the math in traditional Latin. Now, one of the reasons for that was that when I was a boy going to Catholic school, mm-hmm. the Catholic Mass had always been conducted in Latin. Mm-hmm. And then around the mid-60s, there was a council in the Vatican, and they had this meeting, and they said, all the Catholic churches, they found out that Catholic churches were losing people. So they said, okay, the church can decide if they want to do Mass in the language where they're at, English or, French or whatever. They could use the local language. Right. And then some churches, because the older adults they still remember traditional Latin from when they were kids, were saying, we'd still like hearing that Latin Mass. And so a lot of these church dioceses decided, okay, we're doing 10 Masses a week, we'll do 1 in Latin. Right. And that was the reason. Not to form domestic terrorists, not to overthrow the government, just for the tradition of how the Mass used to be in the 60s. Before it was changed.
So under Christopher Wray, the internal management of FBI is just a mess.
Yeah. Well, at the high level, at the executive level, yeah.
Right. It's just a mess. We have lots of questions here. Okay, two questions. One is some people worry about another 9/11. They
absolutely. Absolutely.
You think it's possible, huh?
No, I think it's probable.
Oh. Okay.
Given the number of people that have entered this country, and they talk about the gotaways. Now, they've stopped some of the people at the border, mm-hmm. and they've been able to stop 160 on the terror watch list. Those are people caught.
Right.
Anytime, the gotaways are in the millions. Yeah. So who are they? We don't know who they are, where they're from, what they want to do, and all of that. And you've got Hezbollah and Hamas training camps in Mexico. So they're right at our border. They could just walk into the United States practically.
Or Tom, maybe they have one in the States, but we just don't know.
Exactly. Well, we know of several possible training camps in the United States. That's under investigation. But the expectation is that there are enough people in the United States that want to do harm that many of my friends and contacts in the national security area are pretty much saying we're probably going to have an attack, at least one, maybe more. And it could be on the level of 9/11, depending what they want to do.
Right. And also another question is, if they move the battlefield to the states, and then Biden going to become a wartime president, so we will still have the 2024 election.
Yeah.
With
there's people speculating, oh, if things get bad, they'll call off the election. No, the national elections were not even called off during the Civil War.
Right. I remember you told us last time.
So there's been no time since the beginning of the country, 250 years ago, after the Constitution was ratified.
Sure.
There's been no time since then that any national election has been called off or delayed.
Because of the situation.
Because of, something, insurrection, nothing.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Even if you had a hurricane hit, it would only affect part of the country, or you might have blizzards in the northern part of the U.S., or, whatever, earthquakes in the West Coast. Whatever might happen might have a local effect for a short time.
Right.
But
national.
It's not going to call off a national election. And not only that, but, when I was young, the hundreds of years ago, the elections were same day. You went to the poll on the same day you filled out a paper ballot. Well, now elections are being held 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead of time. So a good percentage of people have already voted. So by election day, what's the point of trying to cancel it? You have 70 or 80% of the people have already voted.
You're right. And also one last question is, you mentioned that the leftist, the far leftist, wants to bring American down. They tried to bring the other country up, but they saw the difficulty, and then they changed their strategy, tried to put American down to the same level as the rest of the countries. Then what? What's their purpose?
Well, they hate the United States. So to bring it down so that it's not the preeminent country or the dominant country or the superpower. And it's not just the World Economic Forum, but one of their key partners has been George Soros. Right. And they came up with a great strategy. If you want to hurt the United States, start with some position in the government that's very critical. Right. And one of those positions in the government is prosecutors in the various districts of the United States. So hire prosecuting attorneys in Chicago, in Washington, in New York. Have the Soros people donate millions of dollars to get them elected, and then elect people that will not prosecute. So now you have areas all over the country where serious crimes are not prosecuted. Right. And as a result, then the police are demoralized. The city goes down. The city's downhill. You have all of this chaos, and it's perfect. It's bringing down the country from the inside out. In the major cities, make New York completely unsafe, or Chicago, or Baltimore, or Boston. All of these cities, make it that you don't want to live there. If you're a business, you want to move out. Now, you look at, for instance, you see the videos of San Francisco, the people crashing into these stores and just looting it, broad daylight. 80 people go into the store and take it out. Nothing happens. You see that all over the country. Nothing happens. And as a result, businesses are moving out. Right. Now, San Francisco, formerly one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and I worked there. I was an assistant in charge of the FBI there for 3 years in the 90s. The one high-priced shopping district, Union Square, all of these luxury type stores are all moving out. They can't stay in business because of the looting every day, the crime against them every day, or the unsafeness of their customers coming in and getting beat up on the way in or the way out, their cars being looted or stolen or carjacked. And you have that in all these major cities. Right. And the decline of those cities as a result. Yep. So that was probably one of the most brilliant strategies anybody has ever come up with to bring the United States down. Make it so the major cities can't be a good place to raise your kids, a good place to live, or a good place to have a business.
It's all gone. So some people said that is the step one, is just destroy America. And the step two is someone wants to become the world leader, like a world government, to govern every countries in the world. Do you think so? Do you agree with that?
Oh, the so-called globalism is it's a huge issue. Have laws that are watered down all over the world. And so then one country isn't dominant. One country's economy can't be dominant, or military, or any of that. And so you see under Biden, tremendous loss of strength of the United States, economically, culturally, militarily. It's gone downhill, as I said, at the fastest rate ever. So he's a tremendous leader. In 3 years, he's been able to do that much damage to this country.
That is true. Wow, we actually talk a lot. Well, let's see. Okay, so we thank you so much, Tom, to give us a very detailed describe about the 3 period of time. One is after 9/11. One is Obama time. One is Biden time. On the 3 different period of time, how FBI changed and how this change affect the people. And also, thank you so much to mention the current big challenge to the U.S. And this is so important to everybody. It's affect everybody's life, and we need to know that how urgent the situation is. And thank you for answering the questions for the audience. And so, what else you want to tell the audience in 1 or 2 minutes?
I think just that, I have seen up close and personal the immigration to the United States by Chinese Americans. And Chinese people who came here wanting to be free of the CCP in China, wanting to live in America, wanting to raise their children in the United States. And in addition to having their children go to school here, go to American universities. And, what I see is a level of patriotism among these Chinese Americans higher than American Americans, because they know what they left. They know where they lived before, what that was like. And now they come here. They don't want somebody else coming into the country and destroying the country. So I think that that's a big factor. What I look at is that immigrants that have come here legally, properly, and want to be patriotic in the United States, that in the long run, they'll probably save the country. So because they come here, my wife is one of them, her friends, other people, that's how we met, friends of friends of her friends, who are all like that. They're all supportive and extremely patriotic to the United States, that they came here, great sacrifice. And especially, you have Chinese Americans, Chinese friends of mine who in China were doctors, were lawyers, were pharmacists. They had jobs like that when they come here, they don't have a license to practice medicine in the United States. They don't have what they had there. And that meant nothing. Get rid of that. So what? Come to the United States and build this country. And I think that, my grandparents were like that. My parents' parents coming to the U.S., who were Spanish background and from Mexico, same thing. But that generation coming in, my grandmother that had 6 or 7 kids, my mother's mother, she wanted her kids to be Americans. And they were going to come, and they were rich in Mexico. They were pharmacists and doctors and lawyers. They didn't care. They came here and started from nothing. And my grandmother was like, my kids are going to be patriotic Americans, my grandchildren, all of that. Very, very strong Americans. And my uncles, her children, all were in the military in World War II, fought for the United States at World War II, against Japan, against the Nazis in Europe. And that's the kind of patriotism and dedication that used to be here. And now you see some of these people mostly, a lot of them American born, spoiled college kids, don't appreciate it. And we've seen that over and over in the United States, people that don't appreciate what this country has to offer and how lucky you are. If you're like, I'm just lucky. I was born in the United States. My parents were born in the United States. How lucky is that? And so to me and my family and my close friends and my new friends that have come over from other countries, to them and to all of us, it's extremely important to keep this country, keep it healthy, keep it going strongly. Right. And that's why I do this podcast. That's why, 30 years in the FBI and 6 as a police officer and a consultant back to law enforcement. And I feel like now there's still something more I can do, and that's basically talk. So that's why I appreciate the opportunity to keep spreading this word.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. And one thing in common, that we all love this country dearly. And we all want to do anything that we can do to save this country. We love USA.
And you're doing it. So keep up the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
And to me, you and your colleagues are heroes, American heroes.
Thank you. You are our role model. So we'll keep doing that, doing the interview maybe sometime next week. And I really appreciate not only the information you gave us and the courage you gave us. We need that. And we'll do together. We will not let American down. We'll do that.
Great. That's great.
Thank you so very much.
Cheyenne.
Thank you. I'll see you next week, and take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.好，那我现在刚刚这个Tom 讲完了他最后讲的一段真的是很感人那我等一会儿呢就再做一个节目，把他讲的这个主要内容跟大家用中文来报告一下因为如果还是这个节目时间太长了，现在已经快1个小时了。好，那就我们下一个节目再见。非常感谢各位朋友，也感谢大家的这个提问。是不是还是有一个提问我没看到啊？ Nancy， 如果他们以战时状况没有只允许邮寄选票，怎么阻止选票造假？这个是我们可以很好的探讨一个问题。以巴战争是反法西斯战争，哈马斯就是现在法西斯。好，那我就把这个节目就到这儿结束我们总的来讲是3个问题，我下一个节目来跟大家去来谈一下。好，谢谢。